Silence. That's what 17 seconds of it sounds like in a blood-soaked warehouse after a newborn stops screaming. The kind of silence that makes trained killers check if their ears are ringing. The kind that makes even the rats in the walls freeze mid-scurry. But it wasn't silence that stopped the Chilsung clan's cleanup crew in their tracks. It was the fact that Ron Wan-shik, the man they called the Silent Blade, the enforcer who once broke a rival's spine without changing his expression, was holding a baby. And she had gone completely, utterly quiet. Wan-shik's tailored black suit was dusted with plaster from the blown wall. His crisp white shirt had a splatter pattern across the collar that wasn't his own blood. The loosened black tie hung askew like a noose that had failed its job. But his hands, those hands that had ended 23 lives in the last 6 months alone, were cradling a newborn wrapped in a stained white blanket with a gentleness that looked almost painful. His face told a different story. Sharp cheekbones, angular jaw, hair perfectly styled except for that one rebellious strand falling across his forehead. But his eyes, those dark, exhausted eyes, were fixed on the infant with an intensity that made his second-in-command take an instinctive step back. The tattoo on Wan-shik's neck, that intricate black calligraphy that marked him as property of the Ran family bloodline, seemed to pulse in the dim warehouse light. A slave mark, a brand of loyalty, a promise written in ink that he had never, not once in 32 years, broken. Behind him, Minho cleared his throat. "Boss, the disposal team is waiting at the docks. The Dawn wants this loose end handled before dawn." Wan-shik didn't respond, didn't even blink. His thumb had found its way to the baby's tiny hand, and her impossibly small fingers had wrapped around it with that instinctive grip newborns have, the one that makes even monsters remember they were once vulnerable too. That's when he shifted her slightly, adjusting the blanket that had slipped. That's when the amber light from the broken overhead fixture caught the side of her head at just the right angle, and Wan-shik saw it. Behind her left ear, barely visible against her rich brown skin, a birthmark, crescent-shaped, specific, unmistakable. The exact same mark that Nia had shown him 9 months ago, laughing as she pulled her hair back in his penthouse, calling it her moon kiss, saying it made her different from everyone else in her family. Nia, who had vanished without a trace 6 months later. Nia, who his brother had told him ran back to America, couldn't handle the life, wasn't strong enough for a man like him. Nia, whose disappearance Wan-shik had accepted because the Dawn said so, and the Dawn's word was law. Nia, who was clearly, horrifyingly, dead. The warehouse suddenly felt smaller. The weight of the baby felt heavier. The tattoo on his neck felt like it was burning through his skin. "Boss?" Minho's voice had an edge now. Behind him, 3 other enforcers had their hands hovering near their concealed weapons. Not because they didn't trust Wan-shik, but because trust in the Ran family had an expiration date, and hesitation smelled exactly like betrayal. Wan-shik's mind was racing through calculations. The baby had been kept in a closet in a rival's stash house. The mother was labeled a traitor. The order was to silence the evidence. But evidence of what? A relationship Jun-ho had already claimed ended peacefully, unless it hadn't ended peacefully. Unless Wan-shik's older brother, the charming, ruthless Don of the Chilsung clan, had done what he always did when something threatened his vision of purity and control. Unless this baby, this crying, screaming, inconvenient piece of evidence wasn't a rival's problem. Unless she was Wan-shik's daughter. The baby stirred against his chest, making a soft sound that wasn't quite a cry, but wasn't quite contentment either. And here's the thing about the Ran family bloodline that was whispered in the clan but never spoken aloud. The old legends said that Ran blood only found true peace with Ran blood. That family recognized family, even when the mind denied it. The baby had screamed for 17 minutes straight while 5 different men tried to quiet her. She had gone silent the instant Wan-shik's arms wrapped around her. Minho shifted his weight. "Boss, we need to move. The Dawn is waiting for confirmation." Wan-shik looked up then, and the men in that warehouse would later describe his expression as the moment the Silent Blade finally found his voice. Except he didn't speak. He didn't explain. He didn't justify. He just adjusted the baby more securely against his chest, his suit jacket falling open to shield her from the cold draft, and reached behind his back for the Glock 19 he always carried in his waistband. "Tell my brother," Won-shik said, his voice quiet and calm, and absolutely final, "that the job's done." Minho's eyes widened. "Boss, we need the body for—" The shot wasn't loud. Suppressed weapons rarely are. But Minho's kneecap exploding was loud enough that the baby flinched but didn't cry. She just burrowed deeper into Won-shik's chest, like she knew exactly where she was safest. The other 3 enforcers drew their weapons. Won-shik was faster. 2 shots. 2 bodies hitting the concrete before their guns cleared their holsters. The third man, young, maybe 22, had his weapon aimed, but his hand was shaking. "Go," Won-shik said. "Tell Junho I have his loose end. Tell him I know what he did, and tell him that if he wants her back." He paused, looking down at the baby, at that tiny crescent moon birthmark, at the daughter he didn't know existed until 17 minutes ago. "He's going to have to go through me." The young enforcer ran. Won-shik walked toward the exit, stepping over Minho, who was clutching his destroyed knee and whimpering. He didn't look back at the bodies, didn't check if they'd survive. In his world, survival was no longer his concern. His world had just shrunk to exactly the size of the infant in his arms. Outside, Seoul's neon lights painted the wet streets in blues and pinks and poisonous greens. His Mercedes was parked in the alley, still running, still warm. He'd planned to be in and out in 10 minutes. Quick disposal. Back to the compound for the Dawn's birthday celebration at midnight. Instead, he was strapping a newborn into the back seat, using his suit jacket as a makeshift nest, his hands shaking for the first time in a decade. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He knew exactly who it was. The text was simple. "Where is the package?" Won-shik looked at the baby through the rearview mirror. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was soft. She looked nothing like him, and everything like the woman he'd loved in a secret so deep. Even his own heartbeat had learned to lie about it. He typed back, "I know." 2 seconds later, his phone exploded with incoming calls. Junho, the underbosses, the lieutenants, every single number in the Chilsung clan's hierarchy lighting up his screen like a Christmas tree designed in hell. Won-shik turned the phone off. Then he took out the battery. He pocketed the SIM card and dropped the phone out the car window, watching it shatter on the asphalt. Then he drove into the Seoul night. A man with a baby he'd just learned was his daughter, a target on his back the size of the entire Korean underworld, and a tattoo on his neck that was about to mean absolutely nothing. The silent blade had just made the loudest declaration of war his family had ever seen. But before I reveal what happens next, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from in the comment section, because Won-shik's life is about to change in ways no one saw coming. This is the story of how a newborn baby with a crescent birthmark completely transformed the most feared enforcer in Seoul. Let me paint you the full picture of how a cleaner and his secret daughter ended up burning the Chilsung clan to the ground. 47 minutes earlier, Won-shik had led the breach. The raid had taken exactly that long from entry to cleanup. Won-shik prided himself on efficiency. The rival crew had been sloppy, kept their product in a residential building in Hongdae where college students stumbled home drunk at 3 a.m. Amateur hour. The kind of mistake that got you erased from the ecosystem. Won-shik had led the entry team himself. 5 men, silenced weapons, no witnesses. The targets had been eating ramyeon when the door came down. They'd barely reached for their guns before it was over. Clean, surgical, the way the Dawn liked it. But then came the crying. At first, Won-shik thought it was a cat. Buildings in this part of Seoul always had strays. But the pitch was wrong. Too human, too desperate, too alive in a room full of things that had just stopped being alive. "Boss." One of his men, Chang-min, was standing by a closet door, his weapon still raised. "You need to see this." Won-shik crossed the apartment, his leather shoes sticking slightly to the cheap linoleum. The crying got louder, more insistent, the kind of sound that made your teeth ache. Inside the closet, wedged between winter coats and a vacuum cleaner, was a plastic bassinet. The kind you buy at a convenience store when you're not planning to keep a baby long. And inside that bassinet was a newborn, maybe a few days old, screaming like the world was ending. Which, Wanshik supposed, it probably was for her. What do we do? Changmin's voice had that edge of panic men get when their training manual doesn't cover something. Do we call the dawn? Wanshik stared at the baby. She was wrapped in a white blanket that had seen better days, her tiny fists waving in the air, her face scrunched up and red from the effort of screaming. Dark skin, curly black hair, completely out of place in a drug den run by a Korean crew. His phone buzzed. Text from Junho. Status? Wanshik typed back. Clean. Complications. The response was immediate. Handle it. 2 words. That's all it took in the Rand family. Handle it meant make the problem disappear. Make it like it never existed. Make it so that the Don could sleep soundly knowing his little brother had done what needed doing. Wanshik had handled hundreds of complications. This should have been just another one. But the baby's crying was doing something strange to his concentration. It was cutting through the professional detachment he'd spent 15 years building, peeling back layers of carefully constructed indifference like someone was taking a blade to his spine. Get the cleanup crew, Wanshik heard himself say. Tell them 40 minutes. And the baby? Wanshik reached into the bassinet. The baby's screaming intensified, her tiny body rigid with distress. He'd never held an infant before, didn't know the first thing about it. His hands, still wearing leather gloves sticky with someone else's regret, slid under her tiny form and lifted. She was impossibly light. Couldn't have weighed more than 7 or 8 pounds, fragile in a way that made every weapon he'd ever held feel like a child's toy by comparison. He brought her to his chest, awkward, unsure, expecting her to scream even louder. The crying stopped, not gradually, not a slow wind down into whimpers, just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. The baby's eyes, dark and unfocused, blinked up at him. Her tiny mouth formed an O of surprise. Then she made a soft, cooing sound and settled against his blood-spattered shirt like she'd found exactly what she was looking for. The men in the room went silent. Changmin stared. Boss, what did you— Get the cleanup crew, Wanshik repeated, his voice flat. Now. He walked out of the apartment holding the baby, descended 3 flights of stairs, and got into the back seat of the Mercedes where his driver, Park, was waiting with the engine running and the heat on high. Where to, boss? Wanshik looked down at the baby. She was still quiet, her breathing soft and even against his chest. The usual disposal site. Industrial docks. Park's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, but he didn't ask questions. Wanshik paid him not to ask questions. The drive through Seoul at 4 a.m. was smooth. Most of the city was asleep, just taxis and delivery trucks and the occasional drunk stumbling between karaoke bars. Wanshik adjusted the baby in his arms, trying to find a position that didn't feel like he was going to break her. That's when the blanket slipped. The streetlights outside painted the interior of the car in alternating strips of amber and shadow. Wanshik tilted the baby's head slightly, checking for any signs of injury, any reason she might have been abandoned in a closet in a drug den. And there, behind her left ear, barely visible against her brown skin, a crescent-shaped birthmark. Wanshik's world tilted. 9 months ago. His penthouse. Nia pulling her hair back, laughing at something he'd said, the early morning light making her skin glow like warm honey. See this? She'd said, turning her head to show him the mark behind her ear. My grandmother called it a moon kiss. Said it runs in our family. Every 3rd generation gets one. She'd traced it with her finger, that unconscious habit she had when she was relaxed. Makes me special, right? Wanshik had kissed the mark, had told her she didn't need a birthmark to be special, had meant it in a way he'd never meant anything before in his carefully constructed life. And now he was staring at the exact same mark on a baby who was supposed to be a complication to handle. His hands started shaking, Park noticed. Boss, you all right? When did the target's crew start operating? Wan Shik's voice came out rough. The ones we just hit? Maybe 8 months? They were small time. Don't know why the Don wanted them handled personally. 8 months. Nia had vanished 3 months ago. The math wasn't math, it was a timeline written in blood. Wan Shik's mind raced backward. The last time he'd seen Nia, she'd been nervous, kept touching her stomach, said she had something important to tell him. He'd promised to come back after a job. One quick meeting with Junho, then he'd be home. But Junho had kept him late. Hours of discussion about territory and loyalty and the importance of bloodline purity. When Wan Shik had finally gotten back to his penthouse, Nia was gone. Clothes gone. Toiletries gone. Just a note that said, "I'm sorry. This isn't the life I can live." He'd believed it, because Junho had been there when he found the note, had put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Foreign girls, they don't understand our world. Better to let her go." Wan Shik had let her go. Had buried the grief under work, under violence, under the comfortable numbness of being the silent blade. But she hadn't left. She'd been taken. The baby stirred in his arms, making a small noise. Wan Shik looked down at her, at this tiny, impossible piece of evidence that his brother had lied, had possibly done something far worse than lie. The docks appeared out of the industrial darkness like a graveyard for ships. Cranes loomed overhead, their skeletal frames silhouetted against the purple-black sky. At the edge of Pier 7, a van was waiting. Wan Shik recognized it. White panels, no plates, tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that existed specifically to make things unexist. Park stopped the Mercedes 50 feet back. "Want me to come with you, boss?" "Stay with the car. Engine running." Wan Shik got out, the baby still cradled against his chest. The December air was brutal, wind coming off the water like knives. He shielded the baby's face with his suit jacket as he walked toward the van. The fixer stepped out. Han Ji-woo, 60 years old, had been disappearing problems for the Chilsung clan since before Wan Shik was born. He took one look at Wan Shik holding the baby, and his expression didn't change. Nothing ever made Ji-woo's expression change. "The package?" Ji-woo's voice was gravel and cigarettes. Wan Shik stopped 10 feet away. The baby was quiet against his chest, her tiny hand gripping the fabric of his shirt. That crescent birthmark seemed to burn behind his eyes even though he couldn't see it anymore. "There's been a change," Wan Shik said. Ji-woo's hand drifted toward the inside of his jacket. Not threatening, just prepared. The Don was very clear about the instructions. "I'm sure he was. He said, you might have trouble with this one. Said to remind you that blood is blood, but orders are orders. Blood is blood." Junho had known exactly what he was ordering Wan Shik to do, had probably enjoyed the cruelty of it, making his little brother dispose of his own child without ever knowing it. Wan Shik looked at Ji-woo, calculated the distance. The old man was fast, but Wan Shik was faster. Had always been faster. "Tell my brother the job's done," Wan Shik said. Then he drew his weapon and shot Ji-woo in the left knee. The old man went down with a grunt, more surprised than pained. Wan Shik kicked his weapon away, then fired a second shot into the van's engine block. The vehicle hissed and died, steam rising from under the hood. Ji-woo looked up from the concrete, blood pooling around his leg. "You know what you just did?" "Yeah." Wan Shik was already backing toward the Mercedes. "I know exactly what I just did. The Don will kill you. Will kill everyone you ever spoke to. He can try." Wan Shik got back in the car. Park was staring at him like he'd just sprouted wings. "Drive. Now." Park drove. They didn't go to the estate. Too risky. Wan Shik directed Park to take them to one of his private properties. A small apartment in Mapo-gu he kept under a false name. Insurance, he'd always called it. A place to disappear if everything went wrong. Everything had just gone wrong. The apartment was on the 5th floor of a building that asked no questions. Wan Shik had Park wait in the car while he carried the baby upstairs. She was starting to fuss, making small, distressed sounds that made his chest tight. Inside the apartment, Wan Shik laid her carefully on the couch. She immediately started crying again, that same desperate scream from the closet. He'd read somewhere that babies cried when they needed something. Food, probably. Or a diaper change. Or both. Wan Shik stared at her, this tiny creature who had just cost him everything, and felt a wave of absolute helplessness crash over him. He pulled out his phone, started to search for nearby 24-hour convenience stores, and then saw the notification. 17 missed calls, 12 from Junho's number, 5 from various underbosses. And one text, just received. "Where are you, little brother?" The baby was still screaming. "Okay," Wan Shik said to the empty apartment, to the baby, to himself. "Okay." He went back downstairs, told Park to hit every 24-hour store between here and Gangnam and buy formula, bottles, diapers, and anything else a baby might need. Park looked at him like he'd lost his mind, but took the stack of cash Wan Shik handed him and drove off. Back upstairs, Wan Shik tried to remember anything his mother had ever said about babies. He'd been 15 when she died, hadn't paid much attention. Junho had taken over his education after that, had taught him about loyalty and honor and the importance of doing whatever needed to be done for the family. The baby's crying intensified. Wan Shik picked her up again and she quieted, just like before. That crescent mark behind her ear seemed to pulse in his peripheral vision. He walked to his safe, hidden behind a false panel in the bathroom. Inside were passports, cash, weapons, and documents, but also, buried under everything else, a small box he hadn't opened in months. Inside the box, a photo of Nia. Just one, taken secretly on his phone, printed at a shop in Itaewon where nobody knew his face. She was laughing, caught mid-motion, her hair falling across her face. Beautiful. Alive. Wan Shik had kept it because he was weak, because some part of him refused to believe she'd just walked away. He held the photo next to the baby's face. The resemblance was subtle, but there. The shape of the nose, the curve of the lips, and that birthmark, undeniable proof written in genetics that couldn't be argued or explained away. This was his daughter, his and Nia's, a child he'd never known existed until tonight, and his brother had tried to erase her. Park returned 40 minutes later with 3 shopping bags full of baby supplies. Wan Shik met him at the door, took the bags, then held out his hand. "Your phone." Park handed it over without question, another burner already in his jacket. Wan Shik swapped his SIM card into Park's phone, then handed him more cash and told him to disappear for a few days. Park didn't argue. Inside the apartment, Wan Shik spread everything on the floor. Formula powder, bottles, diapers in 3 different sizes because he had no idea which one was right, wipes, cream for something called diaper rash, tiny clothes covered in cartoon animals. The baby was screaming again. Wan Shik picked up a bottle, tried to read the instructions on the formula container. His hands were shaking. When had his hands started shaking? He'd performed surgery with a pocket knife on a man's shoulder to remove a tracking chip, and his hands hadn't shaken. But now, holding a bottle and a can of powder, they trembled like he was 80 years old. He managed to mix the formula, somehow got the nipple attached to the bottle without dropping anything, and brought it to the baby's mouth. She latched on immediately, sucking with desperate intensity. The screaming stopped. The apartment fell into a silence so complete, Wan Shik could hear his own heartbeat. He sat on the floor, the baby cradled in one arm, the bottle in his other hand, and just watched her eat. She was so small, so completely dependent, so utterly vulnerable in a world that had already tried to kill her twice before she was old enough to remember her own name. That's when he noticed the blood on his shirt. Not from the raid, he'd changed shirts in the car. This was fresh, spreading slowly from his left side where his jacket had hidden it. Jiwoo must have gotten a shot off. Wan Shik hadn't even felt it. Adrenaline was a hell of a drug. He finished feeding the baby, managed to figure out the diaper situation through trial and error that left both of them frustrated, and then laid her down in the shopping bag surrounded by the new clothes, since he didn't have a proper bassinet. She looked up at him with those dark, unfocused eyes and made a soft cooing sound. Wan Shik peeled off his jacket and shirt. The wound was a graze, maybe 2 inches long across his ribs. Not deep enough to need stitches, but deep enough to sting like hell. He cleaned it with vodka from the freezer, pressed a dish towel against it, and taped it down with duct tape. Professional medical care would have to wait. Professional anything would have to wait. He sat on the floor next to the shopping bag, his back against the couch, and looked at his daughter, because that's what she was. Not a complication, not a loose end, not a problem to be handled. His daughter. The tattoo on his neck itched, that symbol of servitude, of unbreakable loyalty to the family head. Wanshik touched it, traced the lines with his fingers. 15 years he'd worn this mark. 15 years of believing that family meant something sacred. But Junho had murdered Nia, had kept the baby alive as, what? Insurance? Leverage? A sick backup plan in case Wanshik ever stepped out of line? And then, when the baby became inconvenient, had ordered Wanshik to dispose of her, his own niece, his brother's own flesh and blood, several times removed. No, not just his niece, his daughter. The full weight of it hit him then, sitting on the floor of a safe house apartment with a bullet graze in his side and a newborn sleeping in a shopping bag. He'd spent 15 years being the silent blade, the cleaner, the enforcer, the loyal soldier who never questioned orders. And in one night, one moment, one heartbeat of recognition when he saw that crescent birthmark, all of it had shattered. He'd started a war, against his own brother, against the entire Chilsung clan, against an organization that had eyes in every police precinct, hands in every politician's pocket, and enough firepower to level city blocks. And he'd started it over a baby who couldn't even hold her own head up. Wanshik laughed. Quiet at first, then louder, until he had to press his hand over his mouth to keep from waking her. The absurdity of it. The impossible, insane, absolutely suicidal absurdity of choosing this tiny, helpless infant over everything he'd spent his adult life building. His phone, the one he'd taken from Park, sat on the floor beside him. By now, Junho would know something was wrong. Would have people at the docks finding Jiwoo with a destroyed knee and a story about Wanshik going rogue. Would be making calls, activating assets, putting prices on heads. Wanshik looked at his daughter. She was sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. In the dim light from the street outside, that crescent birthmark was barely visible, but Wanshik knew it was there. Would always know it was there. Your mother's name was Nia, he said softly, not sure if talking to sleeping babies was normal but not really caring. She was funny, smart, had this laugh that made you want to hear it again. She loved coffee, hated Seoul winters, said snow was only romantic in movies. The baby's hand twitched in her sleep. She would have loved you, Wanshik continued. Would have been a better parent than I'll ever be. I don't know how to do this. Don't know the first thing about raising a kid, but I know how to protect things. And I know how to make men regret being born. He touched her tiny hand. Her fingers reflexively gripped his thumb. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to protect you, and I'm going to make sure the man who killed your mother regrets every choice he's ever made. Outside, Seoul was starting to wake up. Early morning traffic, street cleaners, the city moving forward like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Wanshik could feel it in the weight of the baby's hand around his thumb, could feel it in the hollow space where his loyalty to his brother used to live, could feel it in the way his future had just rewritten itself in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The silent blade was dead, had died the moment he picked up a crying baby and felt her go quiet in his arms. What was left was just a man with a bullet graze, a daughter to protect, and a brother to bury. Wanshik closed his eyes, just for a moment, just to gather his strength, because tomorrow, no, today, it was already dawn, the real war would begin. But for now, in this small apartment with cheap furniture and thinner walls, there was just a man and a baby, and the quiet sound of breathing that meant both of them had survived the night. That would have to be enough. Wanshik woke to the sound of engines, multiple vehicles, heavy ones, the kind the clan used when they weren't trying to be subtle. He was on his feet before his eyes fully opened. the Glock already in his hand. The baby was still asleep in her makeshift bed, oblivious to the danger closing in like a noose. Through the window, he could see 3 black SUVs blocking both ends of the street, men getting out, 15, maybe 20, all wearing the same dark suits, the same dead expressions. Junho wasn't wasting time. Won-shik grabbed the baby, wrapped her in his jacket, and was out the door before the first footstep hit the stairwell. He took the fire escape, descended 3 floors in seconds, dropped the last 8 feet to the alley. The baby woke up and started to cry. Of course she did. He ran. Behind him, shouts, the thunder of boots on metal, a gunshot that spanged off the dumpster to his left. Won-shik zigzagged through the alley, emerged onto a main street just as rush hour was beginning. Businessmen heading to subway stations, students clutching coffee, normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that death was sprinting through their morning commute. Won-shik spotted a taxi, flagged it aggressively. The driver saw the baby and smiled, thought he was just a stressed father. Had no idea the man climbing into his back seat had 17 of Seoul's most dangerous criminals 30 seconds behind him. Itaewon, Won-shik said. Fast. The driver pulled into traffic. Won-shik looked back. The SUVs were stuck at a red light, blocked by a bus. 30 seconds of breathing room. He used it to check the baby. She was still crying, her face red and scrunched up. He bounced her awkwardly, trying to remember what had calmed her before. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You have 24 hours to return what belongs to the family. After that, everyone you've ever known starts dying. Won-shik deleted it. They switched taxis in Itaewon, then again in Gangnam. Won-shik paid cash, never used the same driver twice, kept moving. The baby finally stopped crying, exhausted from the chaos. She fell asleep against his chest, her tiny body trusting him completely despite the fact that he'd gotten her into this mess. By noon, Won-shik had cycled through 4 safe houses. Each one was compromised. The clan was moving faster than he'd expected, locking down his bolt holes with surgical precision. Junho had probably activated every asset, called in every favor, turned Seoul into a hunting ground with Won-shik as the only prey that mattered. The neon streets blurred past taxi windows. Seoul in daylight looked different than Seoul at night. Harsher, less forgiving. Won-shik fed the baby in the back of a coffee shop in Hongdae, changed her diaper in a public restroom in Myeongdong, bought more formula from a convenience store in Sinchon, where the clerk gave him a sympathetic look and said something about single fathers working so hard. If she only knew. By evening, Won-shik was running on fumes. He hadn't slept in over 30 hours. The bullet graze was starting to throb, hot and angry beneath the duct tape. The baby needed proper care, a clean place to sleep, stability, all the things Won-shik couldn't give her while running for their lives through a city that wanted them dead. He ended up in Yongsan, in a love motel that rented rooms by the hour and didn't check IDs. The woman at the desk took his cash, handed him a key, didn't ask about the baby. Won-shik carried her upstairs to a room with a heart-shaped bed and mirrors on the ceiling. Romantic. He fed her again, changed her again, laid her down on the bed, surrounded by pillows. She looked up at him with those dark eyes and made a soft, cooing sound. The crescent birthmark behind her ear caught the red neon light from outside. Won-shik's hands were shaking again. From exhaustion, from the wound, from the sheer impossibility of what he was trying to do. Run from the Chilsung clan. Protect a newborn. Stay ahead of an organization that had been hunting people for 3 generations. He couldn't do this. Not alone. Not like this. The phone buzzed. Another unknown number, this time a video file. Won-shik's stomach dropped before he even opened it. The video showed Chang-min, the young enforcer who'd hesitated in the warehouse, who'd let Won-shik run instead of dying to stop him. He was tied to a chair in what looked like the clan's main interrogation room. His face was already bloody. Behind him stood Junho, immaculate in a white suit, smiling at the camera. "Hello, little brother." Junho's voice was warm, friendly, the same tone he used at family dinners. I hope you and your new responsibility are doing well. I wanted you to see this. Chang-min here says you let him live, that you had a clear shot and chose mercy. Very unlike you. Junho placed a hand on Chang-min's shoulder. The young man flinched. I'm going to kill him now, Junho continued, still smiling. Not because he failed, but because you showed him mercy. I want you to understand something. Every choice you make, every person you spare, every moment of weakness, I'm going to erase it, one by one, until all that's left is you, that baby, and the consequences of your betrayal. The video cut off before the gunshot, but Wan Shik heard it anyway in his imagination. He sat on the edge of the heart-shaped bed, the phone in his hand, and felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Junho wasn't just hunting him, he was making an example, showing the entire clan what happened when you chose anything over loyalty to the family. The baby stirred, made a small distressed sound. Wan Shik looked at her. This tiny, innocent creature who'd done nothing wrong except be born to the wrong people at the wrong time. She deserved better than this. Deserved better than a father who was getting people killed just by knowing them. He picked up his phone, took a picture of the baby sleeping peacefully, that crescent birthmark just visible in the frame, added a caption. I know what you did to Nia. I know why. And I'm keeping her. He sent it to Junho's personal number, the one only family used. The response came in under a minute. Then watch everyone you love die. 6 hours later, Wan Shik got the call. Detective Park, not his driver Park. A different Park. One of the few cops in Seoul who'd helped Wan Shik in the past, who owed him favors but wasn't owned by the clan. His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Wan Shik, they have Min Jung. Wan Shik's blood went cold. Min Jung, the nurse from Seo Daemon who'd stitched him up a dozen times, who'd never asked questions, who'd become something close to a friend over the years. One of maybe 3 people in Seoul who knew Wan Shik as more than just the silent blade. Where? The warehouse in Seongsu, the abandoned textile factory. It's a trap. They want you to come. I know. It's a trap. Then don't come. She's not worth your life. Where is it again? Detective Park gave him the address, then said quietly, You're really doing this? For a baby you just met? Wan Shik looked at his daughter, sleeping peacefully despite the world trying to tear itself apart around her. She's not just a baby. Then what is she? Mine. Wan Shik hung up, stared at the phone, then at the baby, then at the phone again. He couldn't take her, couldn't walk into a trap with an infant strapped to his chest. But he couldn't leave her alone, couldn't risk Junho's men finding her while he was gone. There was only one option. One person in this entire city who might help him, who owed him nothing but had shown him kindness anyway. Mrs. Kim, the grandmother in the apartment below his safe house in Mapo. She'd heard the baby crying yesterday morning, had knocked on his door with a concerned expression and a jar of homemade kimchi, had taken one look at Wan Shik holding the baby awkwardly and said, First time, father? Something like that. I raised 4. You need help, you knock on my door. Wan Shik took her up on the offer now. Showed up at her apartment at 11 p.m. with a baby, a bag of supplies, and a request that sounded insane even to his own ears. I need you to watch her. Just for an hour. Maybe 2. Mrs. Kim looked at him. Really looked. Saw the blood on his shirt, the exhaustion in his eyes, the desperate edge to his voice. You're in trouble. Yes, bad trouble. The worst kind. She took the baby. Didn't ask any more questions. Just held Wan Shik's daughter against her chest and said, 2 hours. If you're not back, I'm calling the police. Fair enough. Wan Shik walked out of that apartment building knowing he might never walk back in. The Seongsu warehouse was 40 minutes away. He took a taxi, checked his weapons in the back seat. 2 Glocks, a knife, a small pistol strapped to his ankle. Not enough for what he was about to do, but it would have to be. The warehouse loomed out of the industrial darkness like a broken tooth. Most of the windows were smashed out, the loading docks empty and rusted. A single light burned in the second-floor office. Subtle. Wanshik didn't bother with stealth. Walked right through the front entrance, his footsteps echoing off concrete. 8 men waited inside, spread out in a loose semicircle. In the center, tied to a chair with a bag over her head, was Min Jung. And standing behind her, holding a pistol to the back of her head, was one of Junho's senior lieutenants, Kim Tae-sung. Old school, brutal, the kind of man who'd torture someone just to see if he still remembered how. "The silent blade," Tae-sung said, his voice echoing in the empty space, finally making noise. Wanshik stopped 20 feet away. Calculated angles, distances, probabilities. 8 men, all armed. Min Jung in the center. Hostage. Leverage. Bait. Classic trap. He'd designed a dozen just like it. "Let her go," Wanshik said. "Your problem is with me." "Our problem," Tae-sung corrected, "is that you betrayed the family, took something that belongs to the Dawn, killed good men, started a war you can't possibly win." "Then why the trap? Why not just kill me?" Tae-sung smiled. "The Dawn wants you alive, wants to look you in the eye when he puts a bullet in that baby's head, wants you to watch, wants you to know that this is what happens when you choose wrong." Something inside Wanshik snapped, not violently, quietly, like a cable pulled too tight finally giving way. "You know what I've realized?" Wanshik's voice was calm, dead calm, the kind of calm that made men nervous. "For 15 years, I did everything Junho asked. Everything the family demanded. Became the silent blade, the cleaner, the loyal dog who bit on command." He started walking forward. Slow, steady, and in all that time, not once did anyone ask me what I wanted, what I needed, what I might be willing to die for. Wanshik, Tae-sung's gun wavered slightly. "I found out 2 days ago that I have a daughter, that the woman I loved was murdered by my own brother, that the child he ordered me to kill is my own flesh and blood." Wanshik drew both Glocks, faster than conscious thought. Muscle memory trained over 1,000 practice draws. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to let Min Jung go. You're going to walk away. And you're going to tell Junho that if he wants me, he can come get me himself." Tae-sung laughed. Actually laughed. "You think you can take all of us?" Wanshik's expression didn't change. "I don't think. I know." What happened next took 12 seconds. Wanshik put 2 rounds in Tae-sung's shoulder before the man could blink. The gun fell from his hand. Wanshik moved, fluid and fast, years of combat training taking over. 2 men to his right went down with knee shots. 3 more charged. Wanshik dropped one with a headshot, used the second as a human shield against the third, then put a bullet through both their shoulders. The last 2 men hesitated. Fatal mistake. Wanshik crossed the distance in 3 strides, disarmed the first with a brutal strike to the wrist, crushed his windpipe with an elbow, and put the second man in a chokehold that cut off blood to his brain in under 5 seconds. 12 seconds. 8 men. None of them dead, but all of them wishing they were. Wanshik walked to Min Jung, pulled the bag off her head. She stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. "You okay?" She nodded, unable to speak. Wanshik cut her bindings with his knife. "There's a taxi stand 2 blocks north. Get there. Get out of Seoul. Don't come back until this is over." "Wanshik." "What?" "Go. Now." She went. Wanshik stood in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by groaning, wounded men, and pulled out his phone. Took a picture of the carnage. Sent it to Junho with a message. "No more games. You want me? Tomorrow night. The estate. Just you and me." The response was immediate. "Finally grew a spine, little brother. I'll be waiting." Wanshik left the warehouse, got back to Mrs. Kim's apartment in 45 minutes. She opened the door with the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. "You're bleeding," Mrs. Kim observed. "I know. You need a hospital." "I know." She handed him the baby. "Whatever you're running from, you can't run forever." "I'm not running anymore." Wanshik took his daughter upstairs, fed her, changed her, held her against his chest, and felt her tiny heartbeat against his. Tomorrow night, this would be over. one way or another. He just had to make sure that when it ended, she was safe. That was all that mattered now. The ancestral Ran estate sat on 3 acres in Seongbuk, behind walls that had stood for 60 years. Won Shik had grown up in this house, had learned to fight in the courtyard, had taken his first life in the basement. Every stone, every shadow, every secret passage was burned into his memory. He arrived at midnight. No taxi this time. Walked right up to the front gate carrying nothing but a single Glock and 15 years of accumulated rage. The guards at the gate didn't stop him. They'd been ordered not to. This was personal. Family business. The old ways. The courtyard was empty except for his brother. Junho stood in the center, wearing that same white suit, his hands in his pockets, his expression serene. Behind him, the main house blazed with light. Inside, Won Shik knew the entire clan leadership was watching. This wasn't just a fight. It was a referendum, a trial, an execution disguised as justice. "Little brother," Junho's voice carried across the courtyard. "I'm glad you came. I was worried you'd choose cowardice." Won Shik walked forward until they were 10 feet apart, close enough to see Junho's eyes, close enough to see the complete lack of remorse in them. "Where is she?" Junho asked. "The baby. Your little mistake. Safe from you." Junho smiled. "Nothing is safe from me. You should know that by now. I've spent 3 days turning this city upside down looking for you. Cost me a fortune in favors and blood, all because you decided to play father to a child that should have never existed. Her name is Nia," Won Shik said quietly. "After her mother. The woman you murdered." "Murdered?" Junho laughed. "I cleaned up your mess. That foreign girl, she was going to ruin everything. Pregnant with a mixed-blood child? Can you imagine the shame? The disgrace? Our family has kept its bloodline pure for 3 generations, and you were going to pollute it with some American girl you met in a bar. She wasn't American. She was Ghanaian, and I loved her." "Love." Junho spat the word like poison. "You sound like a child. Love is weakness. Love makes men stupid. Look at you. Throwing away everything for a baby that's not even fully Korean. She'll never belong here. Never be accepted. You've destroyed your life for nothing." Won Shik's hand drifted toward his weapon. "You kept her alive. The baby. Why?" Junho's smile widened. "Insurance. I thought, maybe one day, if you ever got ideas about challenging me, I could remind you what happens to things you love. But then she became inconvenient. The mother was dead. The baby was crying, keeping her required resources. So I decided to have you dispose of her. Thought it would be poetic. The father killing his own daughter, not even knowing. But you had to go and recognize that birthmark. You're a monster." "I'm a leader," Junho corrected. "I do what needs to be done. You used to understand that. Used to be my best weapon, my silent blade. Now look at you. Broken. Weak. Pathetic." Won Shik drew his weapon. Junho drew his a half-second later. They stood there, guns pointed at each other's heads, brothers separated by 3 feet and an impossible gulf of blood and betrayal. "You know I'm faster," Won Shik said softly. "Maybe," Junho agreed. "But are you willing to kill your own brother? Your family? Everything you've sworn to protect?" Won Shik thought about Nia. About that crescent birthmark. About the baby sleeping peacefully in Mrs. Kim's arms, trusting him to come back, to make things right. "You stopped being my family when you murdered the woman I loved," Won Shik said. "You stopped being my brother when you ordered me to kill my own daughter." "Then do it," Junho challenged. "Pull the trigger. Become a kinslayer. See how that sits with your precious honor." Won Shik's finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot echoed across the courtyard. Junho staggered backward, a red stain spreading across his white suit jacket, right over his heart. His gun clattered to the stones. He looked down at the wound, then up at Won Shik, his expression more surprised than pained. "You actually—" Junho's voice was weak now, fading. "You actually chose her over me?" "Every time," Won Shik said. "Every single time." Junho fell to his knees, then onto his side. His breathing became ragged, wet, the sound of a punctured lung filling with blood. Won-shik walked over, stood above him, the gun still in his hand. "Any last words?" Won-shik asked. Junho laughed, bloody, choking, but still defiant. "The clan will never accept. Your daughter, they'll hunt her. Forever. Let them try." Won-shik fired once more. The courtyard fell silent. Behind him, the main house erupted into chaos. Shouting, orders, the sound of weapons being readied. Won-shik turned to face them, 20 men, maybe more, pouring out of the building. The entire clan leadership, all of them armed, all of them looking at him like he'd just committed the unforgivable sin, which, by their standards, he had. The eldest underboss, Park Sung-ho, stepped forward. 70 years old, had served under Won-shik's father. His expression was unreadable. "Ran Won-shik," Park's voice carried authority that age and violence had earned. "You have killed the family head. Do you claim leadership?" Won-shik looked at the men assembled before him. 15 years ago, he would have said yes, would have taken the throne, ruled with the same iron fist his brother had, built an empire on blood and fear and absolute loyalty. But that man was dead, had died in a warehouse holding a crying baby, had been buried in a love motel in Yongsan while changing diapers with shaking hands, had been erased completely in the moment Won-shik chose his daughter over everything his brother represented. "No," Won-shik said simply. He holstered his weapon. "I claim nothing. The Chilsung clan, its territory, its businesses, its legacy, I want no part of it." Murmurs rippled through the assembled men. Park raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want? To disappear, to raise my daughter in peace, to never see any of you again. And in exchange?" Won-shik reached into his jacket. 20 guns rose in response, but all he pulled out was a USB drive. He tossed it to Park. "Everything," Won-shik said. "Every secret deal Junho made. Every corrupt official on the payroll. Every alliance. Every enemy, every skeleton in every closet. 15 years of information. It's yours. Use it to rebuild, to consolidate power, to keep the clan strong. All I ask is that you leave me and my daughter alone. Forever." Park caught the USB drive, studied it, then studied Won-shik. "You're walking away from everything," Park said slowly. "Power, wealth, legacy, for a baby, for my daughter." Won-shik corrected. "There's a difference." Park was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You have 24 hours. After that, if any of us see you in Seoul, the deal is void." "Understood." Won-shik walked past them, past his brother's body cooling on the courtyard stones, past the house where he'd grown up, past everything he'd ever known. He didn't look back. Mrs. Kim had the baby ready when he returned. She'd fed her, changed her, even bought a proper car seat with money Won-shik had left her. "You're leaving," Mrs. Kim observed. Not a question. "Yes. For good?" "I hope so." She handed him the baby. "She's lucky to have you." Won-shik looked down at his daughter. She was awake now, staring up at him with those dark eyes, her tiny hand reaching for his face. That crescent birthmark behind her ear caught the light. "I'm the lucky one," Won-shik said softly. He left Seoul that night, took a train to Busan, then a ferry to Jeju Island. From there, a private boat to Taiwan, then to Malaysia, then to Thailand. He moved for 2 weeks straight, paying cash, using false documents, erasing his trail like he'd been taught. Finally, he stopped in a small coastal town in the Philippines, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and white sand beaches stretched for miles. He rented a small house, nothing fancy, just 2 rooms and a porch that overlooked the ocean. It was there, 3 weeks after leaving Seoul, that Won-shik did something he hadn't done since he was 17 years old. He took off his suit, hung it in the closet, removed the black tie, the white shirt, the leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. All of it, the armor he'd worn for 15 years. He put on shorts, a t-shirt, sandals. He looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself. The tattoo on his neck still remained. That slave mark. That pledge of servitude to a dead man and a broken family. Wanshik traced it with his fingers. He'd have to get it removed. Laser treatment. It would hurt. Take months. Leave scars. But it would be gone. And he would be free. The baby he'd named her Nia, officially, on a birth certificate he'd forged in Manila, was sleeping in a crib he'd assembled poorly but with love. She was bigger now. Almost 4 weeks old. Starting to focus her eyes. Starting to recognize his face. Wanshik sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the water, and felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Peace. Nia woke up as the last light faded. Wanshik picked her up, carried her to the porch. She looked at him with those serious dark eyes, studying his face like she was trying to understand who this strange man was and why he kept holding her. Then, for the first time since he'd found her in that warehouse, she smiled. It wasn't gas. Wasn't a random muscle twitch. It was a real, genuine smile. Her tiny face lit up, her eyes crinkled, and she made a happy cooing sound that hit Wanshik harder than any bullet ever had. He stood there, holding his daughter, watching her smile at him, and felt tears roll down his face. He didn't try to stop them, didn't wipe them away, just let them fall, while he held the only thing in the world that mattered. "I know," he whispered to her. "I know I'm not great at this, but I'm trying, and I'm going to keep trying. Every day, for the rest of your life." Nia's smile widened. Her hand reached up, grabbed his finger, held tight. Wanshik smiled back. The silent blade was gone. The cleaner was dead. The enforcer had been left behind in a courtyard in Seoul, bleeding out next to his brother's body. All that remained was a man and his daughter, and a future written in sunset colors over warm water. It was more than enough. It was everything. Can Wanshik survive long enough to give his daughter the peaceful life she deserves? And what will happen when the Chilsung clan discovers where he's hiding? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what you think Wanshik should do next, because this is only the beginning. Like this video if you're invested in watching a ruthless enforcer transform into a protective father, willing to burn his entire world down for one tiny life. The next chapter is coming soon, and trust me, you're not ready for what happens when the past Wanshik tried to escape finally catches up with him and his daughter. See you in the next one if Wanshik and baby Nia make it out alive.